You are listening to HOA Checkmate. The HOA tried to weaponize towing. I am standing in my driveway in Boston, Massachusetts, watching a tow truck back up toward my car, and Carol is screaming at me that I parked illegally in a fire lane, even though I am on my own property. My name is irrelevant, my job is data analyst who tracks patterns and timelines, and right now I am tracking how fast this situation is spiraling into absolute chaos. I moved to this Briarwood HOA board development 6 months ago because the mortgage was reasonable, and I thought a quiet suburban life would help my mental health, which has been fragile after a rough couple years. The HOA here micromanages decals and guest passes like it is fine art, and I knew that going in, but I did not expect this. Carol, full name Rebecca Baker, is the Special Assessment Coordinator, which means she threatens sudden new charges whenever she feels like it. She has dark brown, shoulder-length, wavy hair, a gray blazer that looks like she bought it to intimidate people at hearings, a blue baseball cap with no team logo, and a keyring with too many keys jangling loudly every time she gestures. Right now, she is gesturing a lot. She is also holding a tow authorization placard and flashing it at the tow driver, who is a guy in a reflective vest leaning against his wheel lift truck, arms crossed, watching this unfold like it is dinner theater. Carol is yelling that I violated fire lane parking rules by leaving my car in my own driveway overnight. I take a photo of the curb paint, which is yellow, but clearly marks the street curb, not my driveway, and she immediately snaps. Photos do not count. I will make an example out of you so everyone learns. That is her catchphrase. She has said it twice already this week, once in an email blast, and once at the mailbox cluster where she uses a megaphone to announce tow rules to anyone collecting mail. Yes, a megaphone. It is bright yellow and she keeps it in her trunk. The dusty, dry air is making my eyes itch, and there is grit swirling near the curb. The weather today is awful, all hot wind and no relief. The tow driver, whose name tag says Mike, is still watching. He has not moved. I say, Carol, my car is on my property. The driveway apron is mine. The street is over there. I point at the curb. She jangles her keys and says, the board will back me because they are afraid of me. That is her boomerang line, and I file it away in my head because I know it is going to matter later. The conflict started 3 days ago when I had a friend visit, and he parked on the street in front of my house. Guest parking here requires a dashboard pass with a barcode that matches the HOA database, which is managed by a company portal that crashes half the time. My friend did not have a pass because the portal was down when he arrived, so I printed a temporary one from my email. Carol saw it, scanned it with a handheld scanner she carries everywhere, and decided it was invalid. She called the tow vendor. My friend got a warning sticker on his windshield in 24 hours to move or pay $250. He moved. I thought that was the end of it. Then yesterday, I got an email blast from Carol with the subject line, compliance reminder for all residents. The body of the email said that one resident, unnamed but obviously me, refuses community standards and thinks guest parking rules do not apply to them. The email went to every household in Briarwood. My neighbor 2 doors down texted me a screenshot with a question mark. I did not respond because I was still figuring out what to say. This morning I woke up to find a printed notice zip-tied to my mailbox. It said my car, parked in my driveway, was in violation of fire lane restrictions per county ordinance and HOA covenant section 12.4. It gave me until noon to move the vehicle or face towing and fines up to $500. I read it 3 times. My car was not blocking anything. The driveway is a standard 2-car width apron. The curb is painted yellow for street parking restrictions, not my property. I went online and pulled the county ordinance. It said fire lanes must be marked with red curb paint and posted signage. My curb is yellow. There is no signage. I took photos. I took photos of the curb paint, the driveway, the notice, and the county ordinance page on my laptop screen. I saved everything to a folder on my phone. Then I called the HOA management company and got a voicemail. I called again and got a different voicemail. I sent an email with the photos attached. No response. At 11:55, the tow truck showed up. Carol was already standing on the sidewalk, waiting, her keyring jangling. Now we are here. Mike the tow driver has not hooked my car yet. He is just standing there. Carol is shouting that the fire lane issue is non-negotiable and that I am creating a safety hazard. I say, show me the red paint. Show me the signage. She does not. She waves the tow authorization placard again and tells Mike to hook it up. Mike finally speaks. He says, "Ma'am, I need to see the actual violation. If the curb is not red and there is no sign, I cannot tow from private property without a police order." Carol turns on him, face red, and yells that the HOA pays his company $6,000 a month in contract fees, and he better do what she says. That is when I realize this is not about rules. This is about control. Carol has a cozy relationship with a tow vendor, and I am betting the call logs will show it. I do not say that out loud yet. I just hold my phone and keep recording. My neighbor across the street, an older guy named Ed, who is a maintenance worker in a reflective vest, is standing in his driveway, watching silently. He is my ally. He used to work for the management company that runs Briarwood before he retired, and he told me last month that Carol manipulates minutes and agendas to erase objections after the meeting. He said if I ever needed proof of what really happened at a meeting, he still has contacts who can pull the raw recordings. Ed gives me a small nod. I nod back. Carol does not notice because she is too busy yelling at Mike. Mike says, "I am going to need to call my supervisor." Carol says, "You do that." Mike pulls out his phone and walks 10 feet away. Carol turns back to me, jangles her keys, and says, "I will make an example out of you so everyone learns." Third time. I am counting. The time pressure here is brutal. My neighbor 2 doors down, a woman named Lisa, is filming this on her phone and posting to the neighborhood Facebook group in real time. I need my evidence ready before the story gets twisted into me being the problem resident who defied a safety rule. I can already see the narrative Carol will spin: reckless homeowner ignores fire lane, HOA saves the day. If I do not shut that down fast, it will stick. Mike finishes his call and walks back. He says, "My supervisor says if there is a dispute about the violation, we do not tow until it is resolved." Carol's face goes purple. She starts yelling that the HOA has a binding contract and that Mike's company will lose the account. Mike shrugs. He says, "Then you can call another company. But I am not hooking this car." He climbs into his truck and drives away. Carol watches him go, jaw tight, keys jangling so loud I can hear them over the engine. I think that is the end of it. I am wrong. Carol pulls out her phone and makes a call. She does not try to hide it. She says, "I need a second truck here in 15 minutes. I do not care who you send." "Yes, same address." She hangs up and smiles at me. It is not a friendly smile. She says, "You think you won. You did not. I have 3 vendors on rotation. One of them will tow you, and when they do, you will pay the fees plus the special assessment I am going to add for non-compliance. That will be $1,200 total." I stand there holding my phone, my hands shaking a little, and I realize I did not play my hand yet, and she thought that meant I had none. That is the trump card tease. I have evidence, I have a timeline, I have photos, and I have something even better that I am not going to tell her about until the moment it will do the most damage. But right now, I need to buy time. Ed walks over. He does not say anything to Carol, just nods at me and says, "You need a witness for anything, I am here." Carol glares at him and says, "This does not concern you." Ed says, "I used to work for the management company. I know how this works. I am staying." Carol's smile falters for half a second, then comes back. She says, "Fine. Watch me enforce the rules." 15 minutes later, a different tow truck pulls up. This one is older, a flatbed with a rusty frame and no company logo. The driver is a younger guy, maybe mid-20s, wearing a tank top and sunglasses. Carol walks up to him and hands him a piece of paper. He looks at it, looks at my car, looks at me. He says, This says fire lane violation. Where is the fire lane? Carol points at my driveway. The driver says, that is not a fire lane. Carol says, the HOA covenant says it is. The driver says, I need a police report or a code enforcement order. Carol says, I am the HOA. The driver says, yeah, but that does not make you the fire marshal. He gets back in his truck and leaves. Carol is shaking now. Her keys are jangling so hard it sounds like a wind chime in a hurricane. She turns to me and says, I am sending you an attorney letter today. You will pay the fines, the tow fees, and the special assessment, or I will put a lien on your house. I say, you do that. She storms off to her car, a silver sedan with a Briarwood HOA board bumper sticker, and drives away. Ed says, she is going to come after you hard now. I say, I know. He says, you have proof? I say, I have photos, timeline, county ordinance, and the email where she misrepresented the rule. He says, that is a start. You need more. I say, I am working on it. He says, let me make some calls. He goes back to his house. I go inside mine, sit down at my kitchen table, and start building the evidence packet. The packet includes photos of the curb paint with timestamps, a printed copy of the county fire lane ordinance with the relevant section highlighted, a screenshot of the HOA covenant section 12.4, which does not mention fire lanes at all, a copy of Carol's email blast, a copy of the notice she zip-tied to my mailbox, and a timeline document that lists every interaction starting from my friend's guest parking issue 3 days ago. I also pull the call log from my phone showing 3 unanswered calls to the management company. I print everything, put it in a folder, and scan it as a PDF. I email the PDF to myself and to Ed as backup. Then I do something Carol does not expect. I go to the city clerk's office. It is a 10-minute drive from Briarwood. I walk in, wait in line, and ask for a confirmation that the HOA misrepresented an ordinance in writing. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with glasses and a kind face, listens to my story. She pulls up the county ordinance on her computer and reads Carol's notice. She says, this is incorrect. Fire lanes are red, not yellow. Yellow curbs are for street parking time limits, not fire access. She prints an official letter on city letterhead confirming that my driveway is not a fire lane and that the HOA notice contains false information. She signs it, stamps it, and hands it to me. She says, if they try to fine you, show them this. If they keep going, file a complaint with the state HOA Oversight Board. I thank her and leave. I add the letter to the packet. Now I have the trump card. I am not going to show it to Carol. I am not going to show it to the local management company rep. I am going to show it to the management company regional supervisor instead of the local rep, because the local rep is the one who lets Carol get away with this stuff. I looked up the company hierarchy online last night and found the regional supervisor's email. Her name is Janet. I draft an email to Janet with the PDF attached and a brief summary. HOA coordinator issued false fire lane violation, attempted towing from private property, misrepresented county ordinance in writing, evidence attached. I do not send it yet. I am waiting for Carol to escalate one more time so the email lands with maximum impact. That evening, I get the attorney letter. It arrives via email at 7 p.m. The sender is a law firm I have never heard of, and the letter is full of bluff language meant to scare me into paying instantly. It says I am in violation of multiple HOA covenants, that I owe fines totaling $800, that I must pay within 5 business days or face a lien and legal action, and that I have waived my right to dispute by failing to attend the last board meeting. I did not know there was a board meeting. I checked the HOA website. The meeting minutes from 2 weeks ago do not mention my name or any parking violations. I checked my email. No meeting notice. Carol manipulated the minutes and agenda to erase objections after the meeting, just like Ed said she would. I call Ed. He answers on the second ring. I say, she sent an attorney letter. He says, that was fast. I say it does not match the meeting minutes. He says, of course it does not. She adds violations retroactively. I had a guy on my street get hit with a 4-month-old fine that never appeared in any minutes until the day they filed the lien. I say, "Can you get the raw recordings?" He says, "I will try. Give me 2 days." I do not have 2 days. The next morning, Carol shows up at my house with a second volunteer, a younger woman named Ashley, who is filming from behind me with her phone, so every move I make looks worse on camera. Carol is holding her megaphone. She stands on the sidewalk and announces to the entire street that I am a non-compliant resident who refuses to follow fire safety rules and that the board will be pursuing all available remedies. Ashley keeps filming. I do not engage. I just stand in my doorway and record her with my phone. Carol sees me recording and smiles. She says into the megaphone, "Notice that the resident is filming me instead of addressing the violation. This is the behavior of someone who has no respect for community safety. I will make an example out of you so everyone learns." Fourth time. She really loves that line. I stay calm. I do not say anything. Carol and Ashley leave after 5 minutes. The whole street heard it. My phone buzzes. It is a text from Lisa, the neighbor who was filming yesterday. She says, "I am on your side." That was insane. I text back, "Thank you." She says, "I have the video from yesterday if you need it." I say, "Yes, please." She sends it. I add it to the evidence packet. Ed calls me that afternoon. He says I got the raw audio from the last board meeting. You are not mentioned once. Not in violations, not in new business, not in fines. She made it all up. I say, "Can you send me the file?" He says, "Already in your email. Check your spam folder, it is a big attachment." I check. It is there. I download it, listen to the relevant section. Ed is right. My name does not appear. Carol talks about guest parking policy in general terms, but does not single anyone out. The attorney letter claimed I was non-compliant based on board action from that meeting. That board action does not exist. Now I have everything I need. Photos. Timeline. County ordinance. City clerk confirmation. Attorney letter with false claims. Meeting audio proving no board action. Video of Carol harassing me with a megaphone. Call log showing the management company ignored me. I update the PDF, attach the new files, and prepare the email to Janet, the regional supervisor. I do not send it yet. I am waiting for the final showdown. It happens 2 days later. Carol schedules an emergency compliance hearing at the clubhouse and sends me a notice via certified mail. The hearing is mandatory. If I do not attend, the fines double and the lien moves forward. The notice says the hearing will address multiple violations including fire lane parking, guest parking abuse, failure to display proper decals, and obstruction of HOA enforcement. I read it twice. Half of those violations are invented. I never obstructed enforcement. The decals are current and visible. The guest parking issue was resolved when my friend moved his car. I call Ed. I say she is setting up a hearing. He says of course she is. That is how she locks people in. She controls the hearing format, the evidence rules, and the outcome. You will not win in that room. I say I am not trying to win in that room. I am trying to get her on record. He says, "Good. Bring your evidence. I will be there." The hearing is on a Thursday evening at 6 p.m. I arrive at 5:55. The clubhouse is a beige building with a small meeting room that smells like old coffee and cleaning spray. There are 6 chairs set up in a row facing a table where Carol and 2 other board members are sitting. Carol has her key ring on the table in front of her, jangling every time she shifts in her seat. The 2 other board members are a man named Steve and a woman named Diane, both in their 60s, both looking uncomfortable. Ed is sitting in the back row. Lisa is there too, along with 3 other neighbors I recognize but do not know well. Carol calls the hearing to order. She does not use a gavel, but she does use her megaphone, which is sitting on the table next to her key ring. She says, "This hearing is to address the ongoing non-compliance of the resident at 428 Maple." She does not use my name. She says, The violations include fire lane parking, improper guest passes, failure to follow TOW on-site protocols, and obstruction of enforcement. The board has reviewed the evidence and determined that fines totaling $800 are appropriate. The resident has 5 minutes to respond. I stand up. I say, I brought evidence. Carol says, the board has already reviewed the relevant materials. I say, you have not seen this. I open my folder and pull out the city clerk letter. I say, this is an official confirmation from the city clerk that my driveway is not a fire lane and that your notice contained false information. Carol's face goes blank. She says, that does not matter. The HOA covenant supersedes city ordinances and private community matters. I say, no, it does not. State law requires HOA rules to comply with local codes. If you enforce a rule that contradicts a county ordinance, you are violating state law. Steve, one of the board members, leans forward. He says, can I see that letter? I hand it to him. He reads it, looks at Carol, and says, did you check the county ordinance before you issued the violation? Carol does not answer. She jangles her keys. Steve says, Carol, did you check? Carol says, the covenant is clear. Steve says, the covenant does not mention fire lanes. I checked this morning after I got the hearing notice. Carol says, Section 12.4 covers parking restrictions. Steve says, parking restrictions are not the same as fire lanes. Diane, the other board member, speaks up. She says, I am confused. If there is no fire lane violation, why are we fining him? Carol says, because he obstructed enforcement. Diane says, how? Carol says, he refused to move his car when instructed. I say, I refuse to move my car from my own driveway because I was not violating any rule. Carol says, you were violating HOA policy. I say, show me the policy. Carol does not. She looks at the megaphone. She picks it up. Steve says, Carol, put that down. We are in a meeting room. Carol puts it down. I pull out the meeting audio file on my phone. I say, this is the recording from the last board meeting. My name is not mentioned once. No violations, no fines, no board action. Your attorney letter claimed I was non-compliant based on that meeting. That was false. Steve says, let me hear it. I play the relevant section on my phone speaker. The room is silent. When it finishes, Steve looks at Carol and says, you told us he was non-compliant at the last meeting. Carol says, he was. Steve says, he was not mentioned. Carol says, it was implied. Steve says that is not how this works. Diane says, I want to see the full evidence packet. I hand her the folder. She reads through it slowly. Photos, timeline, ordinance, clerk letter, attorney letter, call logs, video link. She looks up at Carol and says, you sent an attorney letter without board approval? Carol says, I have authority to manage enforcement. Diane says, not without a vote. You know that. Carol says, the board will back me because they are afraid of me. She says it out loud, in front of everyone. Steve and Diane both freeze. Steve says, excuse me? Carol realizes what she just said. Her face goes white, then red. She says, I meant the board trusts my judgment. Steve says, that is not what you said. The room is silent. Ed is smiling in the back row. Lisa has her phone out, recording. Carol tries to recover. She says, the hearing will proceed. I am recommending the full fine plus a special assessment for obstruction. Steve says, I am not voting for that. Diane says, neither am I. Carol says, you do not have a choice. Steve says, yes, we do. This is a board, not a dictatorship. Carol stands up, grabs her megaphone and her key ring, and says, fine. I will handle this myself. She walks out. The door slams behind her. Steve looks at me. He says, I apologize. This should not have happened. The fines are dismissed. The lien is canceled. We are going to review the enforcement process and rewrite the policies. Diane says, we are also going to review the tow vendor contract. If there is a personal relationship affecting decisions, that is a conflict of interest. I say thank you. Steve says, if you have additional concerns, send them to the management company. I say, I already did. He looks confused. I say, I sent everything to the regional supervisor this morning. I did. Right before the hearing, I sent the email to Janet with the full evidence packet attached. The subject line was false HOA enforcement and vendor conflict of interest at Briarwood. I kept it professional and factual. I included photos, timeline, city clerk letter, attorney letter, meeting audio, and video. I also included a note about the tow-vendor relationship and suggested an audit of call logs and contract terms. Janet replied within an hour. She said, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I will be visiting the property tomorrow to meet with the board and review procedures." Janet shows up the next day at 10 a.m. She is a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She meets with Steve and Diane first, then asks to see Carol. Carol does not show up. Janet calls her 3 times. No answer. Janet leaves a voicemail saying that Carol is suspended from all enforcement duties pending an investigation. She also says the management company is terminating the tow vendor contract effective immediately due to an insurance risk warning that makes the board panic. That is the payback vector. The insurance company reviewed the vendor relationship and flagged it as a liability because there was no competitive bidding, and the call log showed preferential treatment. The board had no idea. When Janet told them, they froze all enforcement pending a policy rewrite. That is the HOA consequence. The following week, the board holds a special meeting. Carol is not there. Steve chairs the meeting and announces that Carol has been removed as meeting chair and lost the microphone control. That is the Karen consequence. She is still on the board as a voting member, but she no longer runs the meetings, no longer manages enforcement, and no longer has access to the tow vendor list. Diane takes over as enforcement coordinator. The first thing she does is issue a formal apology to me in writing and refund the $50 certified mail fee the HOA charged me for the hearing notice. The funny karma beat happens 2 weeks later. Carol tries to park in a guest spot without a guest pass because she assumes the rules do not apply to her. A new tow vendor, hired through competitive bidding, scans her car, finds no valid pass, and boots it. Carol calls the vendor and demands they remove the boot. The vendor says, pay the fee or wait 24 hours. Carol calls Diane. Diane says, the rules apply to everyone, including board members. Carol pays the fee. It is $250, the same amount she tried to charge my friend. Ed texts me a photo of Carol's booted car. I save it. The HOA investigation wraps up a month later. The management company audits the call logs and finds that Carol contacted the original tow vendor 47 times in 6 months, far more than any other board member. They also find that Carol issued 14 violations in that period, and 12 of them involved towing or tow threats. Only 2 of those violations were upheld after appeal. The other 12 were dismissed as improper or fabricated. The board votes to remove Carol from the enforcement committee entirely. She is still a voting member, but she has no authority over parking, decals, or fines. The new policy requires all violations to be reviewed by 2 board members before any enforcement action. It also requires the management company to confirm that violations match actual rules before sending notices. I keep the evidence packet on my phone just in case, but I do not need it again. The new enforcement process works. Guest parking violations drop by 80% because the portal gets fixed and the passes are easier to print. Tow calls drop to almost 0 because the new vendor requires police confirmation for any private property tow. The board settles into a functional rhythm. Steve and Diane run meetings that stay on topic and end on time. Carol attends but does not speak much. Her megaphone stays in her trunk. 6 months later, the board elections happen. Carol runs for re-election. She loses. A retired teacher named Mark wins her seat. Mark's platform is transparency and common sense. He wins by a landslide. Carol moves out of Briarwood 2 months after that. I do not know where she goes. I do not care. The neighborhood is quieter without her. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA drama where the little guy wins. Ed becomes a close friend. We have coffee once a week and he tells me stories about the old days when the management company was even worse. He says I got lucky because I had evidence and I stayed calm. He says most people either pay the bogus fines or move out because fighting takes too much energy. I say, my mental health was on the line. I had to fight. He says, you did good. I say I had help. He says, that is what neighbors are for. Lisa becomes another ally. She organizes a neighborhood watch group that monitors HOA enforcement and posts meeting minutes online so everyone knows what is happening. The group grows to 30 members in 3 months. When the new board tries to approve a special assessment without proper notice, the group shows up at the meeting and votes it down. The board learns fast that transparency is not optional anymore. The city clerk who helped me, the woman with glasses and the kind face, becomes a minor hero in my story. I send her a thank you card and a gift card to a local coffee shop. She sends back a note saying she is glad she could help, and that she sees HOA disputes like mine more often than people realize. She says most residents do not know they can ask for official confirmations, and most HOAs count on that ignorance. She says I did exactly the right thing by getting it in writing. The tow driver, Mike, the first guy who refused to hook my car, turns out to be the owner of his company. I find that out later when I see his truck at a gas station and stop to thank him. He says, I do not tow from private property without proof. It is not worth the liability. Too many HOAs try to use us as hired muscle, and I do not play that game. I say, you saved me a lot of trouble. He says, you saved yourself. You had the photos ready. Most people do not. I shake his hand and we part ways. I see his trucks around town sometimes, and I always wave. The attorney who sent the bluff letter never follows up. I look up the firm online and find a bunch of one-star reviews saying they send threatening letters for HOAs and never actually file suits. The firm is based 3 states away and does not have a Massachusetts license. I report them to the state bar. I do not know if anything comes of it, but I feel better doing it. The management company regional supervisor, Janet, becomes a fixture at Briarwood. She visits once a quarter now and sits in on board meetings to make sure things stay on track. She also implements a new rule. Any enforcement action over $200 requires her approval. That kills the special assessment threats. Carol used to throw around 4-figure fines, like candy. Now the board has to justify every dollar, and Janet does not approve anything without evidence. The evidence packet I built becomes a template. Ed shares it with other neighbors who get bogus violations, and 3 of them use it to fight back successfully. One guy gets a landscaping fine dismissed because the HOA rule he supposedly violated does not exist in the covenant. Another woman gets a deck stain fine dismissed because the color she used is explicitly allowed in the architectural guidelines. A third neighbor gets a trash can fine dismissed because the photo the HOA used was taken on the wrong day. The board stops issuing fines for 6 months after that because they know people will fight back now. My mental health improves. The harassment was pushing me to the edge, and winning the fight pulls me back. I sleep better. I stop checking my email every 10 minutes expecting another threatening letter. I start enjoying my house again instead of feeling like I am living in a surveillance state. The quiet matters. The lack of fear matters. I did not realize how much Carol's campaign was affecting me until it stopped. The neighborhood changes in small ways. People are friendlier now. The HOA is less of a threat and more of a service organization. The pool gets resurfaced. The landscaping looks better. The monthly newsletters focus on events instead of enforcement. The board approves a community garden. Families start using the clubhouse for birthday parties instead of avoiding it because it smells like dread. Briarwood feels like a place people want to live instead of a place they are stuck. I stay. I could move, but I do not want to. I fought for this house and this neighborhood, and I won. That matters. I put up a bird feeder in my front yard and watch the sparrows and finches come every morning. I plant flowers along the driveway apron, right where Carol tried to claim was a fire lane. They bloom yellow and red. I water them every evening. No one complains. The megaphone disappears. Carol leaves it behind in the clubhouse storage closet when she moves out. Steve finds it during a cleanup day and asks if anyone wants it. No one does. He tosses it in the trash. I am there when it happens. I do not say anything. I just watch it go into the bin, bright yellow and silent forever. The key ring, the one Carol jangled constantly, also disappears. I assume she took it with her when she moved. I never see it again. Sometimes I think I hear it in my memory, that loud metallic jangling. But then I realize it is just wind chimes, or a dog collar, or keys in someone's pocket. It is never her. She is gone. The parking rules get simpler. The new board eliminates the guest pass barcode system and replaces it with a simple dashboard hanger that says guest in big letters. No scanning, no database, no crashes. If you have the hanger, you are good. If you do not, you get a courtesy notice, not a tow. Tow calls drop to 0. The new vendor sends a thank you email to the board because they finally have a client who uses them correctly. The fire lane myth dies fast. The board sends a newsletter clarifying that yellow curbs are for street parking time limits, red curbs are for fire lanes, and private driveways are private property. They include photos and a link to the county ordinance. No one gets confused again. Carol's fake enforcement campaign becomes a cautionary tale that the new board uses to explain why evidence matters and why rules have to be real. I frame the city clerk letter and hang it in my home office. It is a reminder that the truth is not negotiable and that official documentation beats bluster every time. I look at it whenever I feel like the world is too chaotic to navigate. It helps. The story spreads. Other neighborhoods hear about what happened at Briarwood, and a few residents reach out to ask how I built my evidence packet. I send them the template. 2 of them win their fights. One gets a lien removed. Another gets a board member recalled. They send thank you messages. I feel good about that. Fighting back is hard, but it is possible, and it is worth it. The twist, the cozy relationship between Carol and the tow vendor, becomes public. A local news blog picks up the story after Lisa posts about it on social media. The blog does not name Carol, but it describes the scheme: HOA coordinator with unchecked power, predatory tow vendor, fake violations, no oversight. The blog post goes viral in HOA reform circles. The management company gets dozens of calls from other properties asking if their enforcement is clean. Janet spends 3 months auditing every property the company manages. She finds 2 more boards with similar problems. Both get cleaned up. Carol's legacy is forcing the industry to be more transparent. That is not the legacy she wanted, but it is the one she gets. The insurance risk warning that made the board panic becomes a turning point. The insurance company does not just flag the tow-vendor relationship. They also flag the lack of written policies, the lack of meeting records, and the lack of audit trails. They say Briarwood is a liability nightmare waiting to happen. The board takes it seriously. They hire a compliance consultant who rewrites the covenant, updates the bylaws, and implements a records retention policy. Everything gets documented now. Every vote, every decision, every notice. The board hates the extra work at first, but they get used to it. Transparency becomes normal. I never see Carol again. I hear through the neighborhood grapevine that she moved to a condo in another state, somewhere with no HOA. I find that ironic and a little bit funny. The woman who wielded HOA power like a weapon chose to live somewhere she could never do that again. Maybe she learned something. Probably not. I do not spend time wondering. Ed retires fully and spends his days fishing and woodworking. He builds me a small shelf for my entryway as a thank you for being a good neighbor. I put my keys on it every day when I come home. It is solid and well made, just like Ed. He is a good friend. Lisa runs for the board in the next election cycle and wins. She becomes the new secretary and takes meeting minutes with obsessive detail. Every word gets recorded. Every vote gets counted. Every objection gets noted. The meetings are boring now, which is exactly what they should be. No drama, no shouting, no megaphones. Just neighbors managing shared property like adults. The development stays quiet. I see the same faces every day. We wave. We chat at the mailbox. We help each other with yard work and snow removal. It is normal. It is boring. It is perfect. My car stays in my driveway, right where it belongs, and no one tries to tow it ever again. The yellow curb paint fades a little over the years, but it is still there, still marking the street, still proving I was right. I do not repaint it. I do not need to. The city did that for me, and the city does not lie. The story ends not with a bang, but with a slow exhale. I am sitting on my porch one evening, drinking coffee, watching the sparrows at the feeder, and I realize I am not angry anymore. I am not scared. I am not looking over my shoulder. I am just here, in my house, in my neighborhood, living my life. That is the real victory. Not the hearing, not the emails, not the evidence packet. The victory is the quiet. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.